through for the next 45 minutes or so some hints and tips and about factors that can cause discomfort while you're using a computer and working in the office, and what we can do to try, excuse me, and to make that better for you. I'll leave some time at the end for anybody who wants to ask some questions or make comments, and Anusha will be monitoring the comments and questions. I'm sure she'll interrupt as and when it's appropriate, or if something comes up, please, Anusha, remind me if anything is being prompted or you want me to answer as we go through. So common health problems using computers. I'm sure many of you who are watching in have experienced from time to time dry eyes, itchy eyes, blurred vision. Perhaps your vision's okay in the morning, but you can't see by the time you go home. You can't read the buses signs or the road signs as well. Headaches or even soreness. There's a number of things that can cause this. First of all, this might sound strange, but when we concentrate on a computer, we forget to blink, or we don't blink so much. It is a reflex action. So it isn't something we normally have to consciously do. But when we focus, our blink rate reduces, and that means our eyes dry out and all the bits of dust in the air build up and you get a gritty feeling. For those of you who use contact lenses, you'll be more prone to having dry, itchy eyes. Another common cause for this is particularly in the winter when the humidity's lower and the central heating's on, that dries out the air around us. So a few things you can be doing if you are suffering from this is to use eye drops to help keep your eye lubricated, and to blink frequently. Now, I know it's a reflex, so it sounds a bit strange, but by simply looking around the room, changing your focus, looking at something else, that will trigger that reflex action. You can also rest your eyes or rest your vision by scaling around a room and looking at different things. And that will serve two purposes, which I'm going to be moving on to in a minute. One other thing you might want to do is, if you are in a room with quite a lot of heating and the air feels dry, is to simply get a bowl of water and leave that on the windowsill or on a table, and not near any electrics, of course. And that will evaporate and help to rehumidify the air. It doesn't sound much, but it does actually make a difference. Alternatively, have some nice plants around that need quite a lot of water, and that will help to humidify the air as well. Now, I just want to focus a little bit more on visual fatigue and when your eyes begin to ache and get tired and don't focus. Why does that happen? It's because our eyes get stuck in position. But behind our eyes, we've got three groups of muscles, and they're called the ciliary muscles. You might need to know that at some strange time. You never know. Perhaps if you're doing a quiz night, it might come up. It's one of these random kind of questions. So the ciliary muscles are behind your eyes, and they help your eyes to move and to focus. So when you're looking at a computer screen for long periods of time, especially when you're looking at lots of tiny words or looking at a spreadsheet with lots of tiny letters, those eye muscles are working harder. And remember what I said earlier about we forget to blink when we're concentrating. So we have a double whammy here of potential discomfort problems. So to kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, we can get into a habit of looking away from the screen very frequently, but also focusing on something at different distance, different size, and different color. I just want you to take a minute to try this. So I want you to just look at a freckle on your hand and focus on it, and then look away and focus on something in the distance in the mirror, maybe a spot of rain or something. And then look at something close up again on your desk, focus on something you can read. And now focus again at something distant. Some of you may have noticed some kind of movement or tension from behind your eye. And what's happening there is your ciliary muscles are moving. And the ciliary muscles help your eye to move and to focus. So it's exercising them and it's stopping them getting stiff. It's a little bit like when we drive up the motorway and we're driving for a long time and we get out and our shoulders start hurting and we start wanting to do some of this. You're doing exactly the same to your eyes. You're moving the muscles, you're getting them lubricated again, and you will automatically reintroduce that reflex of blinking. So it serves a number of purposes. The trick, though, is to do this from the beginning of the day and to be a bit more disciplined about doing that, rather than leaving it till halfway through the day or to the afternoon when your eyes begin to get a little bit tired. Something else that you can do to help you with visual fatigue is to look at your contrast on your screen and your polarity. Now, this image here shows opposite polarity, because in one image we have a screen that's black with white writing on it. Then on the other one, we have white with dark black writing and blue writing on it. So if you have more than one screen, try and make sure that you have similar polarity, that they're all either pale background with dark words or vice versa. When you have opposite polarity, dark and light, light and dark, your eyes are having to work much harder to process that information and send that through to the brain. And that's going to induce fatigue and headache much more quickly. So polarity is quite important, as is screen contrast. If your screen is too bright or too glaring, again, your eye muscles and your optic nerve has to work harder in order to focus and to see what's around. And if any of you who are listening in are dyslexic, you may have something called light stress, and that makes ability to process words and to read words much more common. You may find yourself jumping and missing words, or the words jumping around more. If you can soften your screen, that may help you. So here's an example here of how we can soften the screens. Well, this one is just in grey text, but this one here is brighter, but it's still been softened from the very, very bright images that we may get on our various apps. To help you avoid glare, you may also want to look at where your screen is positioned. Now, for some of you, that's not possible to move your desks around, but wherever you can, especially when you're moving offices or if you're working more agile, try and sit sideways or angled to a window rather than facing a window or with your back to a window. Because if you're facing a window, you will have what's called glare in your peripheral vision around here. And that again is going to make your eyes work harder than they need to work. Oh, now this is a big subject. I could spend all day talking to you about mental stress, but stress is commonly associated with use of computers. Usually when the blooming things don't work, to be honest, or the internet doesn't work. Stress is a contributory factor to work-related upper limb disorders like sore back, sore head, sore eyes, sore arms. And the reason for that is that when we are stressed, all of our muscles tense at the same time, and our bodies simply aren't used to working in that way. Our bodies are designed to work so that different muscle groups work at different times when we do different tasks. So when one muscle group is being used, another muscle group gets rested and vice versa. But when we're stressed, we're completely using them all. So when we finally relax, we're exhausted and we feel like we've maybe done a workout at the gym. And to be honest, we have in a way, because our muscles have been working so hard. So things we need to think about is making sure you have enough software training, you know about the systems that you're using, you learn about the shortcuts, the software is fit for the job. And I'm sure many of you here are kind of having a little, oh no, my software kind of moment, where we've all had experience where something's just not user friendly, and it is so frustrating. Having equipment for the job, making sure you've got good enough RAM, memory, that your computer's fast enough, that you have a good internet connection, because that is a major source of stress and disturbance, because it disrupts what you're doing, disrupts your concentration, stops you getting the job done. And if you have a deadline, that makes it even worse. It's important when you're working at a computer that you do take frequent breaks in activity and environment, because that just gives you that breather from that high intensity focus and concentration. That feeling almost like we're on a hamster wheel sometimes. That's certainly how it feels for me sometimes. I feel like I'm running on a hamster wheel, running and running, I'm not getting anywhere. So when I get to that moment, I normally change my task, go and do something else, maybe make myself a drink or something, just to give myself a breather and to come back a little bit more refreshed. Probably the most common health problems relate to what we call musculoskeletal discomfort. It's a bit of a big word, and it relates to the muscles and to our bones, the skeletal parts, musculoskeletal. So common problems that occur with this will relate to having backache. That's usually in the lower part of our back. It could be in our hips, sometimes in the middle part of our back. That does vary slightly according to whether you're male and female as well. Shoulder pain, you get burning pains across your shoulders here, or maybe up your neck, and your neck's really stiff and you feel yourself kind of wanting to stretch it out a little bit. Other people will experience aches in their arms, particularly along here or in their wrists, and tingling sensations, pins and needles in their hands as well. These are all common symptoms of work-related upper limb disorder. I'm sure all of us have experienced it from time to time on short periods. And when we have short-term discomfort, that's one thing. But when the problem keeps happening day in and day out, day in, day out, it can build up what is called a soft tissue injury. And once that happens, it's going to take longer to put it right and for those symptoms to go away, rather than dealing with it, nipping it in the bud. It's like any health problem, any medical problem. The earlier we can identify it and treat it, the quicker we can deal with it and get it fixed. So if any of you are experiencing any of these aches and pains, please pay particular attention to what I'm talking about today. And when this session is finished, to go back to your workstation and see what adjustments you can make. And if you're still experiencing problems, please don't suffer in silence. Please let your manager or somebody like Anusha, let them know. And an assessment can be done. Someone with a more specialist pair of eyes can come down, an independent pair of eyes maybe, can have a look and spend a bit of time looking at how you're sitting and working, and give you some guidance on adjustments that may need to be made. So this all relates to work-related upper limb disorder. That's an acronym. It's been around for a long time, and this is the generic term that I've just been talking about, which reflects all parts of our upper body down to our hips. Here's lots of examples here, so you can see them illustrated on a diagram. Thigh cramps, wrist aches, back pain, shoulder ache. It does include visual fatigue, so-called eye strain, neck pain, and headaches. Shooting pains is something that I haven't actually mentioned before now, as are dull aching and cramps, and these are usually more common in the hands and the arms, although we can get shooting pains across our neck and down our shoulders as well. And there's a number of causes for this, to do with hand cramps. I'm going to come back to that slide in a minute. I'll just explain to you how the body works. And if you understand how the body works, it then gives you better understanding of what we need to do to avoid it. So I mentioned earlier that muscles work in groups, okay? Muscles don't have any energy storage of their own. They rely completely on the circulation of blood, in which they have mainly oxygen and glucose is their food source. So when you have a dynamic movement and you're chopping and changing your tasks, certain muscles get used, as I mentioned earlier, and others go to rest. And the muscles are contracting and extending, contracting and extending. They suck in the blood, get the food that they need, and then they spit out the waste products such as lactic acid, which you may be familiar with. When you're in a static posture with little movements, such as when we're using a computer, that doesn't happen. The muscles are constantly contracted to hold you in position. So in the simplest terms, they get hungry. And at the same time, they can't spit out those toxins, which is why we'll get that burning sensation across our neck or our shoulder or our hands. So that's the damage associated with muscles. In terms of tendons, the best way I can describe this is maybe to show you, if you can see me, a cable. So our tendons, as you can see on this diagram, flow through our wrists and our hands, and they are protected by a sheathing. And as we're moving in a good posture, they can flow well. But when we're in an awkward posture, just exaggerating this, they have to work much harder. And the lubricants that flow through those tendon sheaths get restricted. So the muscles, and the tendons rather, get overheated, if you like, and they dry out. And they'll begin to inflame. And when they get inflamed, they will then touch on the nerve, and that hurts. So examples of this are as listed on the presentation: tendinitis, which occur usually through here, peritendinitis. Epicondylitis is a posh word for tennis elbow, pains in our elbow. Carpal tunnel syndrome occurs through here. It's very common. It's not purely associated with computer users. It can happen in a whole range of other activities, including non-occupational activities, nothing to do with work. But it doesn't always get caused by computers either, or work activities. It is another medical condition which other medical situations can trigger. So if anyone has experienced carpal tunnel syndrome, don't automatically associate it. It's been caused by work, because very often it's not. But your work can exacerbate something else that's going on in your body. So what we need to do is make sure that our posture is such that our muscles and our tendons are as relaxed and as flowing and fluid as they possibly can be. The four main causes of work-related upper limb disorder are poor posture, and I'm going to be showing you some ideas of how to improve that in a minute. Your workstation layout, how much you have to stretch and twist. Please look at how you lay out your workstation to avoid you having to work at arm's length. Just look at my shoulders as I'm working at arm's length here. Look how much they relax when I bring them closer to me. It's the same with a mouse. It's common with mouse users. So if your mouse has a habit of running away from you, it should be close next to the keyboard and close to you. So you can see my shoulder is relaxed here. But when the mouse is further away, it automatically makes your shoulder come up. And then these muscles here, which are called your trapezius muscles, they're the largest in your body, they tighten, and they tighten against the nerves as well. So make sure you bring the things you need close to you without having to stretch or without having to twist. Twisting 45 degrees can increase your risk of discomfort and potential injury to your back and to your hips by up to 45%. So make sure that you're sitting straight and make sure that you're not stretching. A job design is another one. How much you chop and change what you do and vary what you do. And we have already mentioned stress. So I'm going to go back and focus now for a little while on posture. This is the first thing we need to take into account when we're sitting at a computer, whether we're in the office, working from home, working at a client site, or perhaps en route when we're traveling somewhere. And I'm just wondering how many of you know what is the very first thing we need to check when checking our posture. I don't know, Anusha, whether it's possible for anyone to just put in the chat box what they think the answer is and you can read them out to us. Is that possible?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. So if just put in the chat box, anybody, what do you think is the very first thing we need to check when determining if we have a reasonable posture?
So we've got chair height.
It's something you think about. Is there anything else?
Yes. If you're sitting straight.
Yes.
Another one is screen distance.
Yes.
Another one is screen height.
Yes. So much to think about. They're all things that we would think about, but none of them are the first thing that we'd think about. And essentially, this is quite random. You wouldn't perhaps know this unless you've had some specialist training or you've had a specialist assessment. But the very first thing we need to look at is the position of our elbow in relation to the desk whilst we're relaxed. The majority of us sit too low because we've come from school, from university, college, wherever. And when you're sitting in a chair and writing, you can afford to sit lower. And so we get used in our comfort zone to a sitting, working, writing ratio in terms of the heights of things. When we're sitting at a computer, we have the keyboard on top. So we need to sit a little bit higher. And so we need to be higher for that. But if I was to suddenly say to each of you, you need to be sitting an inch higher, you'd think two things. First of all, you think, if you tried, you think, that feels weird, I don't like it, and you'd go back to your comfort zone. The second thing you think about is, what? She's only talking about half an inch or an inch. What's she on about? But believe me, when we're looking at ergonomics and good posture, an inch is like a mile in terms of the difference it can make. And the best way I can describe this to you is for those of you who drive. Have any of you ever got into a car, into your car, and somebody else has been driving it and they've moved the mirror for the back? You've only got to move that a fraction and it makes a difference as to whether you can see through the back window or not well. You've probably moved it a couple of millimeters or maybe a centimeter. So that shows you how my phrase of an inch is like a mile is actually true. And it's the same when we're working at our desks. When we're sitting too low, as we can see in this image here, you can see this person's elbows are well below the desk. You will do one of two things, and I'm going to exaggerate this for those of you who can see me. You will either rest your hands up like this on the desk. Your desk will be here and you'll bring your hands up. So you're angling your hands here and you're stretching the tendons that I described to you here, scrunching them there. So you're going to be increasing risk of overloading them and getting them inflamed. The other thing that may happen, and I see this all the time, and it gets worse when we get busy or stressed, is that we will do this. If you can see me through the camera, I'm not sure if you can see me, when my elbows are in a relaxed position, my shoulders are low. If you look at my elbows as I raise my shoulders, you can see, look at the difference. I don't know if you can see that. The difference in height by lifting and raising our shoulders. And if you don't believe me, just watch some of your colleagues when they go home in the morning, and go home of a night time rather, they'll be going home like this and their shoulders will be hunched. And then they wonder why they have sore shoulders, sore neck or a backache. We're doing it without even realizing it's happening. So elbows are key. We need to either lower our desk or maybe raise our desk, or we need to raise our chair so that when we've relaxed, always have a humph moment. I always call it humph moments. Have a humph, get our elbows right. Sitting in a typing position, our elbow should be in line with the top of the desk. That is rule number one. Okay, please don't forget that. When you go back to your workstation, please check that when your shoulders are relaxed and nice, shrug down, are your elbows above or below the desk? You can see in this picture that this person's also sitting twisted. So that's not going to do any good for a hip or a lower back, or indeed her neck. And we can see here that the keyboard is too close to her. She's got nowhere to rest her arms and her hands while she's not using the keyboard, while she's doing other things. So again, that puts more load on your shoulders. So just to summarize, you have another image here. This person is leaning forward and leaning on the desk. You can see that the curve of this person's back is not good. He's got no back support. That will be putting you, if you actually look, his back is coming forward, but his neck is going up. So it's almost at a right angle. So that's going to actually make his neck extend backwards, and he's going to be more likely to get a neck ache and a headache as well. Where are his elbows? Although he's resting his arms, his elbows are still lower. His shoulders are quite high. So this really isn't ideal. Now, one thing I do want to reiterate when I'm talking about posture is that one, there's no correct posture. There are what we call optimum postures. And two, we are not robots. So there is no one size fits all approach. We will all have slight preferences and variations, and that's okay. And the biggest trick to have in your toolbox is to move. Movement is good, and the more you can move around and vary what you do, the less risk of fatigue and discomfort you're going to have. So please don't be thinking, I have to sit like this all day long, and this is how I have to work, and this is the right thing to do, because that's not correct. There are good ergonomic principles to follow to optimize your comfort. But you are allowed to take into account your own needs, your own preferences to a point, and most of all, to make sure that you move around. So here we can see an example of something that's good. So this person, her elbows, the very first point here, is in line with her desk, the top of the desk. Her wrist is nice and straight. Everything is close to her. Once we've got this center part sorted, we can then think about the rest. If at this point you can't get your feet on the floor, you need a footrest. Now, I've got quite long legs, so I don't need a footrest, but I actually like a footrest because one, I find that having my feet slightly off the ground takes the pressure off my underthighs, and two, it pushes me back into my chair more, and it helps me get better use of my backrest. So I personally prefer the use of a footrest, although I can get my feet on the floor. When we're looking at the back support, we need to make sure that the back is fully supported. And the most important part of the back, whether you're male or female, is this lumbar region here. It's the bit that's just at the bottom of your ribs. If you can get your back of your chair adjusted so that you're fully supported there, it then enables your thoracic region, which is the middle region of your back, and your top back to actually, I'm going to exaggerate this, to actually come down and relax. You can't do that unless this lower part of your back, just above your waist, or where the bottom of your ribs are, that needs to be supported in order to let the middle part and the upper part to drop and to relax. If it's not, you will end up sitting hunched like this and stiff. So check your chair as well. If you need an additional backrest, you can buy backrests, or you can make your own, like I've got here. This is made from beans. and it moves and it molds with me. And so I tend to put this behind me, and then that gives me the support that I need in my lower back to then enable me to drop my shoulders and to completely relax. This image here just shows how the body reacts when we're sitting too low. We can see here how our thighs aren't supported. You can see in this image where it says too low that the seat pan, which is the back to front of the seat, isn't deep enough to support our legs. So the chair should be long enough to support our knees up to about 1/2 inch or an inch just before our knees, at the top of above our knees. And you can see this person's elbows are too low, so she's or he is going to be angling their wrists to reach their keyboard. I don't like the term correct because we're not robots, but the optimum here is where, again, you can see this line here where the elbow is in line with the desk, and we can see here when we're sitting too high how it pushes us forward. So our back is not supported, our shoulders are not supported. It makes us extend our neck back in order to see the screen. Some of you might have a sit-stand desk or work at a higher workstation. And it doesn't matter whether you're sitting or standing, the same principle applies. And so if we are looking at our elbows and shoulders, again, we can still see this nice right angle position. We can see, I haven't mentioned this up to now, but we can see that the screen is eye level and at a reasonable viewing distance for us. Now, on average, the viewing distance for intermediate distance is 19 to 26 inches, but different people have different preferences according to whether you're long or short-sighted, for example, or how large your screen is even. But normally it's about 19 to 26 inches. Sit-stand desks do have advantages in that they do give you more flexibility in changing your posture during the day, but they are more expensive to buy. And if you have a fixed sitting desk, that's absolutely fine. Most of us have that. And just make sure that we get up and move around during the day. Right, I'm going to talk about keyboards next, because over the years we've been asked lots of questions about these funny curvy ones like we can see in the bottom of the screen. And I've had many people, in fact it happened to me a few weeks ago, someone requested a curved keyboard and I asked them why do you want a curved keyboard? And they said, well, that's an ergonomic one, isn't it? It's meant to be better for you. Well, they're designed for a certain reason, which I'm going to describe to you. So I'm going to talk about the curved keyboard first. If you look down at a keyboard, in order to get your hands on a keyboard, I'm going to exaggerate this so you can see this, you have to bring your hands forward like this, because our arms or our bodies are wider than where our hands need to be for the width of the keyboard. And so our hands end up with this position, and this angle here is called ulnar deviation. There's an ulnar nerve that comes all the way down here on the outside, down through to our little finger. And when we're angling like this, the more it's going to put pressure on that nerve. So if we have wider bodies, particularly if we have shorter arms as well, and this might sound a bit weird, when you study ergonomics, you look at people completely differently. It's quite interesting. So all ulnar deviation, all the curved keyboard does is it reduces this angle to this angle. So when you're working at a keyboard, you can work and you can keep your arms and wrists straight without having to angle them out. If you're a touch typist, you probably will hate one of these because you're used to using feel to know where the keys are. They do take a little bit of getting used to. The standard keyboard, which is the black one above, the QWERTY keyboard, should have a mechanism underneath where you can raise it or lower it. And there's no hard and fast rule as to which one is better. It's really what works for you. So most people tend not to bother to look, because they just work. It's just what you're used to. I prefer to have my keyboard angled because I learned to touch type many years ago on an old-fashioned keyboard, which was much more angled than it is now. Most keyboards are right-handed, so if we look at this one at the top here, you can see all the keypads are on the right-hand side, or the number pads. If you're a left-handed person and you're doing lots of figure work, that may be uncomfortable for you, although I do accept that lots of left-hand people have to adapt to a right-handed world. So you might want to request, if it is difficult for you, to have a left-handed keyboard. And yes, you can get them. They are around. They're just not widely talked about because most left-handed people just get on with it and adapt. Laptops. My guess is that many of you who are listening in use part-time, at least part-time, a laptop. Laptops are good, they're light, they're flexible, they're adaptable, and they are designed to be portable. So when you're working on the Who facilities, especially for those of you who are agile workers, you want to be able to pick up your laptop and be able to move and use it wherever. Now, as we're seeing here, the people in the top image, just look at their elbows because they're sitting in a fixed desk and a fixed chair. They can't adjust it. Look how low their elbows are and look how much they're having to look down at the screen. So that makes them lean forward, which is going to put pressure on their neck and their back. Now, that's okay for short periods of time, or if you're doing that on and off throughout the day. But if you're working like that for long periods of a day and on most days, that's not such a good idea. And you're more likely to start suffering, ending up niggly and uncomfortable and finding yourself fidgeting and perhaps even achy. So there are some simple adjustments we can do with laptops. The one on the right hand here is how we tend to work, especially if we're in a meeting room waiting to go into a meeting, or we're in a client site, or we're just hot desking. By making some simple adjustments, I mean, not if you're portable, you can't, but if we look at the picture on the left, we can see how we have the laptop, which is plugged in, is used as the hard drive. We have a large screen that we have the choice of looking at, and we also have a separate keyboard. So you can plug the separate keyboard in, which can be where you want it, close, accessible, and comfortable, whilst being able to look at the screen and still use all the data that's in your laptop if you're using your laptop as your hard drive. And this is another example of someone who works flexibly. So this person, I don't know if you can look at the background, you can see here there's a cooker, there's a table and chairs. This is someone who's been working from home. They were working from home during COVID and still work from home part-time. They got some screen raisers, so the screen is at a decent height. They have a separate keyboard and a mouse that's attached, so the keyboard can be nice and close to them. You can see here it's a right-handed keyboard, no surprises there. And you can see that there is some simple adjustments just by buying 2 or 3 of these screen raisers, and getting an extra keyboard can make a massive difference to your comfort. Some other adaptations you can use are these key laptop boards, where you can place your laptop. You can use these actually as cases, and I'm sure many of you have seen variants of these. So once that's not used, you can fold it up and it acts like a case, like a protective case for your laptop. Then you can open it out and you can use it as a laptop. Some laptops have separate break-off keyboards now that you can use as well. And so you can be much more flexible. When do we take rest breaks? And what is the legal requirement for rest breaks? In terms of computer users, there is no set frequency under law when people are allowed to take a break. Under the working time regulations, you can't work more than 6 hours without taking a 20-minute break. But for computer users, all the regulations say is that you should have variation in tasks. Your work should be broken up with other tasks or other such with suitable breaks or other such breaks. So you either break up your work with different things, or if you're working like I don't know, proverbial battery hen, where you're literally just doing data input, there's nothing else you can do, then you need to be more structured. So a break defined as a variation in work is actually a break. And the reason that's the case is because you're breaking from this repetitive, constant movement, perhaps to pick up a phone and to speak, perhaps to walk to a meeting room, perhaps to go and to talk to somebody, perhaps even just to kind of change posture. Short, sharp breaks is good. It's a bit like someone with a stomach problem, like an ulcer. They're always recommended to have 4 or 5 small meals and to graze throughout the day rather than have 2 or 3 large meals, because their body can process it better. It's the same with rest breaks. If you have lots of short, sharp breaks, you can pace yourself better. If you know that you're going to have some heavy periods at work where you're just going to be really heavily focused for a few hours, finishing a report or something, then you need to pace yourself a bit like a marathon runner does. If you watch anyone running a marathon, or indeed if you've ever had to go at doing it yourself, you will find that the runner will start sipping water and drinking from the first few miles. They won't leave it till they've gone halfway before they start drinking, because they know their body can't catch up in time. So plan your day, and just 30 seconds every 5 minutes at the end of a document, end of a paragraph, a sensible place to stop without breaking concentration. Just kind of move, stretch out, move around. Perhaps every 20, 30 minutes, get up, move around the office, grab some water, go and speak to somebody. That is enough to alleviate discomfort, but provided you do it from the beginning of the day rather than halfway through. And finally, I was asked to talk a little bit about doing some exercises, and I'm not going to start suggesting we start doing office aerobics or computer yoga or anything, but some simple exercises such as stretching your neck sideways, forwards. Actually, I can hear my neck clicking as I'm doing this. Just try it yourself. How many of you have got clicky necks right now? Sideways, forwards and backwards is another one. Keeping our chin in, don't put our chin out. Check your chin's not out. Make sure your chin is in, and then up and down. As soon as your chin is in, it helps your spine to straighten. If your chin's out, it automatically throws your posture out. We can do some simple stretches, such as this. The important thing is to not start looking conspicuous, I guess, when we're sitting at a computer. If we start doing our aerobics, we might have a few comments made or become source of entertainment for our colleagues, which is not always the best thing to do. But some simple exercises, some stretchings, or even just what I call an extended fidget, where we're just constantly moving and releasing the tension. These are good exercises for our neck and our shoulders and our arms. So whether we're moving an exercise such as this, or whether we're moving such as this, and we can even do leg exercises where we can stretch our legs in and out and move around as well. So I said I'd finish at 1:45. I'm just about there. I hope I haven't talked too much. There's a lot to take in. Please give us feedback.